Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another exciting episode of Humble Extras, where today we're taking a look at the June 2019 Humble Original macdows95 by developer Eunice Aelides. Normally I play these games in a first impression let's play sort of style, but I felt I should take the time to better articulate my thoughts. Not because the subject matter is serious this time around, but because I don't find my enraged commentary about big brains, small brains, and smooth brains particularly insightful. The video also would have been over 2 hours long, contained mostly silence, and would more than likely have given the impression that I disliked the game, which I didn't. In fact, I enjoyed a lot of the ideas present and the lateral thinking involved in the various puzzles, creations, and solutions. There were a couple of issues that frustrated me, but that was in part because of the respect I had cultivated for the developer while playing. Allow me to explain. To me, puzzle games are a competition between the developer and myself. It's up for debate whether or not they should be seen that way, but I can't help it. The designer of such a challenge has to be clever, and generally they also have to think so themselves to some degree if they're willing to pose the problem to begin with. They beg the question, are you as smart as me? And I'm inclined to respond with, you're damn fucking right. As such, I don't like asking for help or using hints, especially in a well-crafted game. In fact, the only time I'll accept a hint is when I believe that the issue with my ability to solve the puzzle lies with the creator, otherwise I'll smash my skull against a concrete wall until wisdom is distilled from my scrambled brain and forced through my eye sockets. For the majority of this particular game, the puzzles conveyed an air of competence. They were smart, well-designed, and even went so far as to garb themselves in an abstract, avant-garde, satirical wrapper. Such wrappers are generally where you'll find the most pretentiously arrogant and intellectual puzzle makers like your Jonathan Blows and whoever the fuck it was that made Antichamber. These folks are the kind that seem to think they know you better than you know yourself and build their puzzles around questioning your perception of reality. Their puzzles become a battle of psychology where you attempt to unravel their preconceptions while they attempt to unravel yours. I make it sound haughty and egotistical, but what competitive game isn't really? Generally, it's good fun. The problem I have is that when a game puts me into that mindset, I expect it to follow through. macdows95 occupies that liminal space in reality in which it talks the talk but only emulates walking the walk. By the way, just so you understand where I'm coming from, some of the triggers that put me into that mindset specifically are things like varied and disparate puzzles that sometimes intersect. This gives me the impression that there's a deeper framework under the surface, perhaps in that solving each puzzle only creates the tools to access the magnum opus puzzle at its heart. For instance, solving the portal puzzle brings you back to the login screen and offers you an entirely new puzzle. Another was all of the vague pseudo-philosophy littered throughout its texts, various references to waking up for instance. Telling someone to wake up is pretty much the most pompous and direct way of saying, I am smarter than you, for you are incapable of seeing reality as it truly is. Prepare to be illuminated. That's a pretty weighty concept. The puzzle that most clearly demonstrates the problem at hand is the one that offers you a mathematical problem. One half of the equation isn't numbers but a word. The answer is to type that word into an upside-down calculator in order to get the number that it's meant to represent, and then simply complete the equation. The issue? I hadn't touched the calculator up until that point, and I'd since encountered a completely different puzzle that involved decoding a message that used numbers to represent letters. And on top of that, I'd experienced the previously mentioned portal puzzle, and the message with the numbers and letters had some of its pseudo-philosophical nonsense woven in. That, and it just so happens that every letter in the equation is in the message and thus has a numerical value. At this point, I'm admittedly overestimating the puzzle-making prowess of the developer. I list all the values out and treat that as one mega number, no dice. I decide to up the ante and add them all together. Also incorrect. Of course, I think, if each letter is a variable for the number and they're all placed side by side, algebraically speaking, that would denote that the values need to be multiplied. Alas, that solution didn't involve pulling a calculator out of my ass and turning it on its head. Resigned to believing that I was simply missing something in this great architect's deeper design, I lowered myself to accepting hints, which, in a massive display of adding insult to injury, requires the world's worst minigame. I usually die too soon, but there were several times when I had trouble dying at all. Then, after going for what felt like an eternity, he wouldn't even bother using a 1-to-1 point value. It was absolutely obnoxious, and this was especially true once it was revealed that I wasn't stupid, but that the developer had simply not considered the conflicting information present in his game and overlooked all of the moving pieces that he'd set in motion. He'd only played half of the mind game required for a truly pretentious puzzle experience, and as a puzzle game lover and a logic grappler, it left me feeling blue-balled. This of course isn't the developer's fault explicitly. They don't have a ton of games under their belt, and the ones they do have aren't as big in scope, and he's done an excellent job otherwise. I have to commend him on capturing the insanely domestic feeling of dicking around on a computer that has little more than its operating system installed. Things like clicking and dragging dragging rectangles on a desktop really hit home for me. In terms of tone, presentation, and satirical quality, the game was top-notch. The only advice I would have as a disgruntled player would be to make sure that all of the elements are in harmony. The expectations you set create the sense of trust you have with your player, and if you underdeliver, it leaves them feeling unsure. I can't even tell if I finished the game. It seems like there would be more, but I'm uncertain of what to expect and thus accept this as the endpoint whether or not it actually is. I would say keep that in mind when developing puzzle games in the future. This has been macdows95 by Eunice aka You Know What It Is. I'm just kidding, I made that up. Until next time, remember that failure is not the worst case scenario, to go on with your bad selves and stay awesome.